Sarah lived in a small cottage nestled beside a whispering forest. Her days were filled with the quiet rhythm of tending her garden and caring for her bright-eyed daughter, Emily. Life wasn't always easy. A shadow hung over them, the memory of Sarah's husband, a brave soldier named John, lost in a distant war. He'd been gone for 2 years now, and the pain of his absence still felt fresh. Emily, though only 8 years old, possessed a spirit as resilient as the wildflowers that bloomed in their garden. She helped her mother with chores, her small hands surprisingly capable. She filled the house with laughter, chasing away some of the lingering sadness. Their days were simple, but filled with love. They read stories by the crackling fireplace, baked bread that perfumed the air, and walked hand in hand through the woods, marveling at the wonders of nature. Sarah taught Emily about the stars, about the constellations her father had pointed out to her so many years ago. Evenings were often spent looking at John's picture, remembering his kind smile and the way he used to sing silly songs. They kept his memory alive in their hearts, cherishing every moment they had shared. Little did they know, their quiet life was about to be disrupted by the arrival of someone who would challenge everything they thought they knew. The change arrived on a stormy morning. The wind howled like a banshee, and rain lashed against the windows of their cozy cottage. Emily, ever curious, peered out into the grayness. "Mama, what's that?" she asked, pointing towards the edge of the woods. Sarah followed her gaze. At first, she saw nothing but swaying trees and sheets of rain. Then, she noticed a dark shape lying on the ground, partially hidden by the undergrowth. Fear mixed with concern washed over her. "Stay here, Emily," she instructed, grabbing her shawl. "I'm going to see what it is." The wind fought against her as she made her way towards the figure. As she got closer, she realized it was a man, lying face down in the mud. He was dressed in tattered military clothes, soaked and covered in dirt. He was clearly injured. Sarah knelt beside him, her heart pounding. She gently turned him over. His face was pale and bruised, and a deep gash ran across his forehead. He was unconscious. "Emily," she called out, her voice trembling. "Bring me the blanket from the rocking chair and the water basin." Emily, her eyes wide with worry, quickly obeyed. Together, they managed to drag the injured soldier back to their cottage. He was heavy, and Sarah struggled, but she knew they couldn't leave him out in the storm. He needed their help. This was a man who had fought for their country, just like John. They worked tirelessly, cleaning his wounds and wrapping them in clean bandages. Sarah recognized the signs of exhaustion and trauma in his pale face. She'd seen it in the faces of returning soldiers before, a haunted look that spoke of unspeakable horrors. Days turned into weeks as they nursed him back to health. They learned his name was Thomas. He remained mostly silent, his eyes filled with a distant sadness. He ate the food Sarah prepared with quiet gratitude and offered weak smiles to Emily, who chattered endlessly, telling him stories about the forest creatures and her favorite games. Slowly, Thomas began to heal, both physically and emotionally. He started helping with chores around the cottage, chopping wood and tending the garden. He even learned to play some of Emily's games, his laughter, though hesitant at first, gradually becoming more genuine. Sarah found herself drawn to his quiet strength and his gentle nature. He reminded her of John in some ways, his dedication and his willingness to help others. Emily adored him, seeing him as the father figure she had longed for. He'd patiently help her with her lessons, and tell her stories of faraway lands, carefully avoiding any mention of the war. A sense of peace settled over the cottage, a feeling they hadn't experienced since John's death. Thomas was becoming part of their family, a welcome addition to their small, quiet world. They were a little family again, bound together by kindness and a shared sense of loss. But even as their hearts began to heal, the past lingered. Let's remember John for a moment. He was a good man, a brave soldier. The battlefield was a blur of smoke and fire. Explosions rocked the earth, and the air was thick with the smell of gunpowder and fear. John, a lieutenant, rallied his men, his voice strong amidst the chaos. "Hold the line," he shouted, his eyes scanning the horizon. The enemy advanced relentlessly, a wave of soldiers determined to break through their defenses. John fought with fierce determination, protecting his comrades and pushing back the enemy assault. He moved swiftly, a whirlwind of strength and courage, inspiring his men to fight harder. He remembered his promise to Sarah, his vow to return home to her and Emily. That thought fueled his determination, pushing him to keep going, even when his body screamed in protest. He envisioned Emily's smile, her bright eyes sparkling with joy. Despite the overwhelming odds, John and his men stood their ground, holding back the enemy advance. They fought for their country, for their families, for their freedom. But the battle raged on, claiming lives and testing the limits of human endurance. The horrors of war were all around. It was a fight for survival. Back in the present, Thomas's nights were often disturbed. Sarah would sometimes hear him cry out in his sleep, his voice filled with anguish. She would rush to his room, finding him drenched in sweat, his eyes wide with terror. "It's just a dream, Thomas," she would say softly, stroking his brow. "You're safe now." He would often mumble incoherently, words like fire, screaming, and no escaping his lips. He never spoke of the war during the day, but his nightmares painted a vivid picture of the horrors he had witnessed. One night, Sarah overheard him shout a name, "John. I'm sorry, John." These nightmares grew more frequent, casting a shadow over the peaceful atmosphere of the cottage. Sarah started to wonder about Thomas's past, about the events that had left him so deeply scarred. She knew he was a good man, but she couldn't shake the feeling that he was hiding something, a dark secret that haunted his dreams. Emily, too, noticed Thomas's distress, often asking her mother, "Why is Thomas so sad?" Sarah tried to reassure her, but she couldn't deny the growing unease in her own heart. The idyllic life they had built with Thomas was starting to feel fragile, threatened by the unspoken truths that lay beneath the surface. The past was clawing its way into the present, and Sarah feared it would shatter their newfound happiness. One crisp autumn afternoon, the postman arrived, bringing with him a thick envelope addressed to Sarah. The return address was unfamiliar: War Department, Records Division. A chill ran down Sarah's spine as she took the letter. She hadn't requested any information, so why were they contacting her now, after all this time? She hesitated before opening it, a sense of foreboding washing over her. Emily, sensing her mother's unease, tugged at her skirt. "What is it, Mama?" she asked. "I don't know, sweetheart," Sarah replied, her voice barely a whisper. "But I have a feeling it's about your father." With trembling hands, she tore open the envelope and unfolded the letter. The official language blurred before her eyes, but she focused, forcing herself to read each word carefully. The letter contained a detailed account of the battle in which John had died. It listed the names of the officers involved and described the events leading up to his death. As she read on, her heart pounded in her chest. The letter mentioned acts of bravery, but also acts of confusion. It spoke of a chaotic moment when friendly fire had occurred, a tragic accident that had cost many lives. A specific detail caught her attention: the name of a soldier who had mistakenly fired upon John's unit. The soldier's name was Thomas. The letter continued, describing the soldier's actions in more detail. It mentioned his unit, his position during the battle, and the specific circumstances that led to the tragic mistake. According to the letter, Thomas had been overwhelmed by the intensity of the fighting. Disoriented and panicked, he had misidentified John's unit as the enemy and opened fire. The letter emphasized that it was an accident, a terrible consequence of the fog of war. But that didn't lessen the impact of the words on Sarah. Her mind reeled, trying to reconcile the gentle, kind man she had come to know with the soldier described in the letter, the soldier who had inadvertently killed her husband. The letter also detailed how Thomas had immediately reported his mistake and had been racked with guilt ever since. He had carried the burden of his actions for years, haunted by the memory of that day. The War Department, after a thorough investigation, had deemed it a tragic accident and had not pursued any charges. Sarah reread the description of Thomas, tall, with dark hair and piercing blue eyes, a scar on his left arm from a previous injury. It matched the Thomas who was now tending her garden, playing with her daughter, sharing their meals. The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place, forming a horrifying picture. The man she had welcomed into her home, the man she had started to care for, was the one who had taken her husband's life. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Sarah felt a wave of nausea wash over her. How could this be? How could fate be so cruel? She looked up from the letter, her eyes landing on Thomas, who was just then returning from the garden, his hands filled with freshly picked flowers for Emily. He smiled at her, a genuine, heartfelt smile that sent a jolt of pain through her. How could she ever look at him the same way again? She clutched the letter in her hand, her knuckles white. Emily ran to greet Thomas, her face beaming. "Look, Thomas. Mama got a letter." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. She couldn't let Emily see the letter, not yet. She needed time to process this, to figure out what to do. "It's just a letter from a friend, sweetheart," she said, forcing a smile. "Why don't you go inside and put these flowers in a vase?" Emily, oblivious to the turmoil raging within her mother, skipped inside. Sarah watched her go, her heart aching. She took a deep breath and turned to Thomas. "We need to talk," she said, her voice trembling slightly. Thomas's smile faded, replaced by a look of concern. "Is everything all right, Sarah?" She couldn't meet his eyes. "It's about John," she said, her voice barely audible. "It's about the war." She held out the letter, her hand shaking. Thomas took it, his brow furrowed with confusion. As he read, his face paled, and his eyes widened in disbelief. He looked up at Sarah, his expression a mixture of shock and terror. "Where did you get this?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "It doesn't matter," Sarah replied, her voice cold. "Is it true? Did you kill John?" Thomas recoiled as if she had struck him. "No," he exclaimed, shaking his head vehemently. "It's not true. It was an accident. A terrible mistake." "The letter says you fired on his unit," Sarah pressed, her voice rising. "It says you mistook them for the enemy." Thomas's eyes filled with tears. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. He looked down at the letter, then back at Sarah, his face etched with pain. "It's true," he finally whispered, his voice broken. "It's all true." He sank to his knees, burying his face in his hands. "I didn't mean to. I swear, I didn't mean to. It was chaos, confusion. I made a mistake. A terrible, unforgivable mistake." Sarah stood frozen, her heart pounding in her chest. The man she had come to care for, the man who had brought light back into her life, had confessed to killing her husband. The weight of the revelation was almost unbearable. He looked up at Sarah, his eyes pleading for understanding. "It was a nightmare," he said, his voice hoarse. "Smoke, fire, explosions, we were surrounded. I saw movement, I thought they were the enemy. Everything happened so fast." He described the confusion, the fear, the sheer panic that had gripped him in that moment. He explained how he had misidentified John's unit, how he had opened fire without thinking, his actions driven by instinct and desperation. "I didn't know it was him," he sobbed. "I didn't know it was friendly fire until it was too late. I saw him fall. I heard him scream." He choked on his words, unable to continue. "I reported it immediately," he continued, after a long silence. "I told them everything. I couldn't live with the lie. I've carried this guilt with me every single day since then." He looked at Sarah, his eyes filled with genuine remorse. "I know it doesn't excuse what I did," he said. "I know I can never make it right. But please, believe me, Sarah, I never wanted to hurt him. He was a good man, a brave soldier. I respected him, even though I didn't know him. He hung his head, his body racked with sobs. I am so sorry, he whispered. I am truly sorry for everything. The weight of his confession hung heavy in the air, a palpable presence that threatened to suffocate them both. Sarah stared at Thomas, her mind a whirlwind of emotions. Grief, anger, confusion, and a strange sense of pity warred within her. She wanted to scream, to lash out, to demand justice for John. But she also saw the genuine pain in Thomas's eyes, the deep remorse that seemed to consume him. Emily, sensing the tension, came running out of the cottage. Mama? Thomas? What's wrong? She asked, her voice filled with concern. Sarah quickly knelt down and hugged her daughter tightly. Everything's all right, sweetheart, she said, her voice trembling. Just a little misunderstanding. Why don't you go back inside and play? Emily hesitated, sensing that something was terribly wrong, but she obeyed her mother and reluctantly returned to the cottage. Sarah watched her go, her heart breaking. How was she going to explain this to Emily? How could she shatter her daughter's newfound happiness? Turning back to Thomas, Sarah felt a deep sense of conflict. She couldn't deny the bond that had formed between them, the connection that had brought them all so much comfort. But how could she reconcile those feelings with the knowledge that he was responsible for John's death? She was torn between her grief for her husband and her growing affection for Thomas. The weight of the decision pressed down on her, threatening to crush her. The future that had seemed so bright just moments ago now stretched before her, dark and uncertain. As darkness fell, Sarah wrestled with her decision. The desire for revenge gnawed at her, a primal urge to make Thomas pay for what he had done. She imagined him suffering, feeling the same pain she had endured for the past 2 years. She could turn him in, expose his secret, and let the law take its course. But even the idea of revenge brought her no satisfaction. She thought of John, of his kind heart and his forgiving nature. Would he want her to seek vengeance? Would he want her to become consumed by hatred? She knew the answer in her heart. John would want her to find peace, to move forward, to create a better life for herself and Emily. But how could she forgive the man who had taken his life? How could she forget the pain, the loss, the emptiness that had filled her days since John's death? She paced the floor, her mind racing. She thought of Emily, of the joy Thomas had brought into her life. She knew that telling Emily the truth would devastate her, shattering her innocent world. Could she do that to her own daughter? Forgiveness seemed impossible, yet revenge felt wrong. She was trapped between two unbearable choices, each with its own devastating consequences. The night stretched on, long and agonizing, as Sarah grappled with the most difficult decision of her life. The weight of her choice would shape not only her future, but also the future of everyone she loved. The next morning, Sarah finally told Emily the truth, carefully choosing her words. She explained about the letter, about the battle, and about Thomas's role in John's death. Emily listened in stunned silence, her eyes wide with disbelief. When Sarah finished, Emily burst into tears. It can't be true, she sobbed. Thomas would never do that. He's our friend. Sarah hugged her daughter tightly, her own tears flowing freely. I know, sweetheart, she said. It was an accident. A terrible mistake. Emily pulled away, her face streaked with tears. But he killed Daddy, she cried. How can we ever forgive him? Sarah didn't have an answer. She didn't know if forgiveness was possible. Later that day, Emily approached Thomas. He was sitting alone on the porch, his head in his hands. She sat down beside him, her small face filled with sadness. Thomas, she said softly, did you really kill my daddy? Thomas looked at her, his eyes filled with remorse. Yes, Emily, he said, his voice barely a whisper. But it was an accident. I never wanted to hurt him. I'm so sorry. Emily looked at him for a long moment, studying his face. She saw the genuine pain in his eyes, the deep regret that seemed to consume him. And in that moment, she understood. "Mama is very sad," she said quietly. "Please don't make her sad anymore." She took his hand in hers. "Please stay, Thomas. We need you." Emily's words resonated deeply within Sarah. She looked at her daughter, at her innocent face filled with compassion, and she knew what she had to do. Revenge would only perpetuate the cycle of violence and pain. It wouldn't bring John back, and it would only destroy what little peace they had managed to find. That night, Sarah sat down with Thomas. "Emily wants you to stay," she said, her voice weary. "Anne. I think she's right." Thomas looked up, his eyes filled with surprise. "Sarah, I don't understand. After everything I've done." "It was an accident, Thomas," Sarah interrupted. "A terrible accident. And I know that John wouldn't want me to waste my life on hate. He would want me to forgive. It wouldn't be easy, she knew. The pain would always be there, a constant reminder of their loss. But she couldn't let that pain consume her. She had to find a way to move forward, to honor John's memory by living a life filled with love and compassion. "I'm not saying I forgive you completely," she continued, her voice trembling. "But I'm willing to try. For Emily's sake, and for John's. I'm willing to give you a second chance." Thomas's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you, Sarah," he whispered. "Thank you. I promise I won't let you down." He vowed to spend the rest of his life making amends, honoring John's memory, and being worthy of Sarah and Emily's forgiveness. True to his word, Thomas dedicated his life to honoring John's memory and helping other veterans. He volunteered at the local Veterans Center, offering support and guidance to those struggling with the physical and emotional scars of war. He organized fundraising events to support veterans' families and tirelessly advocated for better resources for returning soldiers. He spoke openly about his own experiences, sharing his story of guilt and redemption in the hopes of inspiring others to seek help and find forgiveness. He never forgot John, always speaking of him with respect and admiration. He also became a devoted father figure to Emily, showering her with love and attention. He helped her with her homework, taught her how to ride a bike, and shared stories of his own childhood. He filled the void left by John's absence, becoming an integral part of their family. Sarah watched him, her heart filled with a mixture of gratitude and admiration. She saw the genuine transformation in him, the way he had dedicated his life to making amends for his past mistakes. She knew that forgiveness was a long and difficult process, but she also knew that it was the only way to truly heal. Thomas never forgot the grace Sarah and Emily showed him, and he vowed to live a life worthy of their compassion, forever honoring the fallen and helping those who served. Years passed. Sarah, Emily, and Thomas built a life together, forever bound by their shared past and the enduring power of forgiveness. The cottage, once filled with grief and sorrow, became a haven of love and acceptance. They never forgot John. His picture still hung on the wall, a reminder of the brave man they had loved and lost. They spoke of him often, sharing stories and keeping his memory alive. Emily grew into a kind and compassionate young woman, inspired by her mother's strength and Thomas's unwavering dedication. She learned the importance of forgiveness and the power of empathy. She understood that even in the darkest of times, hope and healing were possible. Sarah found peace in her decision, knowing that she had honored John's memory by choosing love over hate. She learned that forgiveness wasn't about excusing Thomas's actions, but about freeing herself from the burden of anger and resentment. Thomas, forever grateful for Sarah and Emily's grace, continued to dedicate his life to helping others, honoring the fallen, and living a life worthy of their compassion. He became a beacon of hope for countless veterans, a testament to the transformative power of forgiveness. And so, they lived on, a family forged in tragedy, bound together by love, forgiveness, and the enduring memory of a man who had given his life for his country. Their story was a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the extraordinary power of forgiveness to heal even the deepest wounds. They had found a way to build a future, not forgetting the past, but learning from it, and choosing love and compassion every step of the way.